Donald Trump has taken his threats against Canada to the global stage. Just days into his latest term as U.S. president, Trump delivered a speech today to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, remotely. He continued to insist this country treats the United States unfairly and again suggested the solution is for Canada to become the 51st state.
One thing we're going to be demanding is we're going to be demanding respect from other nations. Canada, we have a tremendous deficit with Canada. We're not going to have that anymore. We can't do it. I don't know if it's good for them. As you probably know, I say you can always become a state. And if you're a state, we won't have a deficit. We won't have to tariff you, et cetera, et cetera. But Canada has been very tough to deal with over the years. And it's not fair that we should have a $200 billion or $250 billion deficit. We don't need them to make our cars, and they make a lot of them. We don't need their lumber because we have our own forests, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need their oil and gas. We have more than anybody. So, just as an example.
For more on Trump's remarks, let's bring in the CBC's Chris Reyes. She joins us live from Washington. And Chris, this economic forum gets a lot of international attention. It would seem at this point Trump is sending a message not just to Canada, but beyond. And it is now numerous times in the past several weeks that Trump has said, some would say threatened, to make Canada the 51st state or through economic force or annexation, whatever word you want to do. But this is now almost relentless, almost daily, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was very clear about who he was talking to from those remarks. He was speaking from Washington to this global audience in Davos, Switzerland. Those remarks that he made about Canada pretty extensively about what he wants to change in terms of relations between the two countries. It happened in the Q&A, and we were actually waiting to see if he would specifically mention Canada in the speech. And when he didn't, we thought he wasn't going to get to it, but obviously he did in that Q&A. But what he did talk about in the speech that affects Canada, let's start with NATO, because obviously, Andrew, that's an alliance that we're a part of. Trump has threatened to pull out of NATO in the past. The United States is the largest contributor to NATO defense. And of course, if they were to leave or check out, that would leave a big hole for all of the other allies in that organization. Now, he didn't say this time around that the U.S. would pull out of NATO, but he did lay out these conditions.
As we restore common sense in America, we're moving quickly to bring back strength and peace and stability abroad. I'm also going to ask all NATO nations to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP, which is what it should have been years ago. It was only at 2%, and most nations didn't pay until I came along. I insisted that they pay, and they did, because the United States was really paying the difference at that time, and it was unfair to the United States.
And now, Andrew, Canada, of course, falls into that category of not meeting NATO defense spending. Trump did not lay out what the United States would do if he didn't if other countries did not meet that condition. And other parts that are particularly relevant to Canada, Trump's big criticism of the Paris climate deal, which he called one-sided. Canada is, of course, a signatory of that deal. He also talked about scrapping the Green New Deal here in the United States, called it a scam. And this is a program that has parallels, not just in Canada, but across the globe. So in this speech, Andrew, Trump is obviously casting himself as a banner holder for these policy positions. So nationalist, populist, anti-regulatory, skeptical of global coalitions and government-directed response to climate change. The big question is, will this embolden the CEOs and world leaders in those rooms to also take up these talking points? And that's really the shift that we are going to be closely watching with this Trump administration.
Yeah, I mean, to say the threshold just on NATO for a second is 2%. For it to now go to 5%, that would be tens and tens of billions of dollars in extra military spending from the Canadian government, which just is, many would say, would be almost impossible to do quickly. Trump also spoke about other global issues. What's most likely to resonate, Chris, with the leaders in that room and in world capitals?
Anyway, very interesting dynamic to be observed in that room. You know, this is a global audience that he's speaking to in Davos, Switzerland. But Trump didn't seem like he felt the need to stray from his America First narrative. He talked a lot about domestic issues, Andrew, national debt, inflation rates, you know, the price of groceries. He took digs at former President Joe Biden. But what he did do in this speech is speak to this global audience in terms of U.S. demands, including this one that he asked of Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia will be investing at least $600 billion in America, but I'll be asking the Crown Prince, who's a fantastic guy, to round it out to around $1 trillion. I think they'll do that because we've been very good to them. And I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which, frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love by them not doing it. I was a little surprised by that.
So, Andrew, what he was really doing here is taking this America First narrative and then pitching it to the global audience. You know, he basically said America is open for business. He promised lower taxes for those who are in and then tariffs for those who are out. And Trump was very clear that he's the guy in charge. He laid out his terms in this speech, what this global community will be dealing with in his administration. Now, the question, again, is will they fall in line? Those already aligned with Trump's politics likely will, but I think it's fair to say that Trump's overarching message in this speech wasn't let's cooperate, it's let's compete.
Chris, thank you. The CBC's Chris Reyes live in Washington.